Hi, so I'm Julian Reid. I'm from the United Kingdom originally, but yeah, I'm a professor of international relations at the University of Lapland in Finland. I began my journey into the university back in the 1990s when I studied at King's College in London. Originally, I signed up to do a degree in war studies and philosophy. Then I graduated with a degree in war. And then I moved abroad to the Netherlands. I did a master's degree at the University of Amsterdam in IPE, International Political Economy. And from there, I went back to the UK, to the northwest of England and Lancaster University, where I wrote my PhD. And then somehow or other, I ended up in Finland at the University of Lapland, close to the Arctic Circle, where I've been a full professor since 2010. And every now and again, I've taken up visiting positions. So I was in the United States at Virginia Tech as a research fellow, and I was a visiting professor at the University of Bristol back in the UK. And now here I am at CAPAS in Heidelberg. The title of my project is After Catastrophic Biopolitics, Towards a Political Eschatology of the Anthropocene. And yeah, biopolitics is a concept and a phenomenon and a problem which I've been wrestling with throughout my academic career. So my PhD was actually on the biopolitics of, and I'm going back to that body of theory, and I'm a big fan of the work of Michel Foucault. And I'm taking a look here at CAPAS as what's changed in terms of the theorization of, of biopolitics across the disciplines. Because it seems to me that there's been something like a kind of catastrophization of biopolitics. You know, if we go back historically and look at how biopolitics worked, originally it was born upon a kind of optimism as to what was possible with regards to the security of life and living systems and the security of the human especially. Whereas today, when we listen to governments talking about life and the policies which are emerging aimed at governing life, there's a shift that has occurred, I think, whereby we've become really scared at the potentials for not just the loss, but even the extinction of life. Not just the life of the human species, but every other species is a cause for concern today. And this is something which I relate in the project to the concept and phenomenon of the Anthropocene. The awareness and claim as to the existence of a historical era in which the human became the main driver of geological change and destruction on the earth. So we somehow or other, over the time that I've been working on this concept, we've developed this not just fear, but also sense of responsibility and guilt at the immense destruction of life which the human has caused and is continuing to cause. And so I'm looking at this and thinking about that and trying to understand where this catastrophization came from, how real it is, or to what extent it is a social and political construct which does work, forms labor for states and governments and those in political power, and the problems and dangers with it. And I'm kind of arguing against it, and or looking at the ways in which we can at least argue against it potentially through the lens of political eschatology, which is a body of thinking and literature which addresses the end of the world, but in a much more positive light. From the perspective of eschatology, the end of the world is a happy event rather than being something that we should be afraid of, and to which life has to be secured against. So I'm interested in unpacking this concept of eschatology to think against biopolitics today in the context of the Anthropocene. Yeah, I think the, this concept of catastrophic biopolitics, which I'm playing with in the project, for me anyway, it captures something of the spirit of dominant approaches, whereby literatures on the Anthropocene, academic literatures, artistic literatures, but also policies are characterized by this kind of sense of mourning and fear and loss at, at the journey that life is taken in the context of the Anthropocene. So that's like a dominant narrative, dominant way of narrating where the Anthropocene has come from and where it's taking us as a species. And yeah, I want to challenge that narrative, challenge that dominant way of telling the story of the Anthropocene, and at least pose the question of whether or not we can't tell different, more optimistic and affirmative and positive and joyful stories about where we're heading in the future politically. Sure. I mean, I think as a species, humanity is an immensely political animal. So, I mean, regardless of what biopolitics and theorists and analysts and practitioners of biopolitics might say about the human, the reality, the underlying reality and the historical story of our journey through time is one of continued capacity to transcend our merely biological life, to risk our life, to sacrifice our life, to fight for things which are bigger and greater than ourselves, and to lose that care for life on which biopolitical regulation and governance depends. So I think, the human we are an immensely political creature, and in a way that means that we are always outside of and beyond the biopolitical image of the human. Yeah, I mean, of course, the apocalypse is another way of naming the end of the world. And for me, there's something about the ending of worlds which is essential to what I call political subjectivity. So, political struggle, political transformation always involves and requires this capacity to bring certain kinds of world to an end. So we're always enacting and invoking and struggling to make apocalypses happen. Apocalypse is a kind of method for political subjectivity in a way that I think gets missed or neglected. When we talk about the apocalypse as this kind of grand event which is on the horizon or something which might or might not happen, we miss the everydayness, as it were, of the apocalypse as a function of political subjectivity. So it's in that way that I'm trying to think about the apocalypse. Which would be Lars von Trier's movie Melancholia, which I must have seen. I think it was either at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And I remember going into the movie theater not having... I mean, I was a big von Trier fan, but I didn't have high expectations of the movie because I knew it was a kind of apocalypse drama. But yeah, I was blown away by how good it was. Because for me, that movie really captures the contrast and the contradiction between these two different forms of subjectivity, which I'm talking about here. So on the one hand, the biopolitical subject of the person or the individual who's terrified by the end of the world, thinking about the sister and the wider family of the main character, whose name I now forget. But I don't know if you remember the main character. It was this woman who kind of embraces the end. She embraces the end of the world in a way that for me was really poetic and beautiful, but also inspiring for the kind of political capacities to embrace the end that I'm trying to work towards in my writings work.